What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we are going over the top 5 value picks as we approach the 2020 season. It's obviously an early edition, so a lot of things are subject to change, especially when we're talking about value. Value is heavily reliant on ADP, and ADP in May is going to look vastly different than what it's going to look like come August as we approach the draft. Regardless, the players on this list are coming in at immense values, and some of them are even steals where they're currently being drafted at their ADP. Before we do get into the video though, make sure you're following us on all social media, and if you're interested in purchasing our draft package, more information can be found on that at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Link for that, as always, in the description box below. But without further ado, let's hop right into the video, and the first player I'm going to start with is David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears. And out of all the players on this list, I believe David Montgomery is going to be the easiest for us all to be on the same page about. For starters, let's talk about last season. It was a disappointing outing for fantasy owners who drafted him highly. He finished 2019 with 25 receptions, 1,074 total yards, and just 7 touchdowns. As a whole, it doesn't sound all that bad. It was good enough for an RB25 finish, but with just 2 games over 20 fantasy points and 8 games under 7 fantasy points, you can rest assured a lot of owners got burnt last season, and a lot of people won't be in the market for David Montgomery for that reason. It's very possible that's already pre-baked into his ADP and why he's fallen to his current ADP, which is the RB25 in Fantasy Pros, the RB22 in Sleepers, so a back-end RB2. So theoretically, if David Montgomery does play at the same level of performance he did in 2019, where he attained that RB25 finish and now has an ADP of RB25, playing at that level would equate to fair value. However, there are numerous factors pointing us in the direction of David Montgomery even improving on those numbers from last season. For starters, let's talk about the touches. One of the major concerns last year was that Tarik Cohen was involved way more often than people would have liked. This ties in heavily to the questionable play calling of Matt Nagy. While Tarik Cohen is likely still going to be heavily utilized in the offense, it's unlikely that Matt Nagy is going to get as quote-unquote cute in situations where the ball clearly should be in the lead back's hands. First-year head coach going 12-4 with a gut-wrenching loss in the playoffs. Well, the leash is going to tighten up now that he went 8-8, showing some clear regression in every area. And while I'm not saying he's on the hot seat necessarily, job security is going to play a factor. One of the things he was most heavily criticized for was the lack of usage. We saw that trending upward towards the tail end of last season, but it's not like the overall volume was a big factor into why he wasn't successful for fantasy last season. The efficiency and lack of touchdowns is what overall capped his upside for 2019. It may surprise a lot of people to hear, but he was 14th in the league in overall rushes, and once again finished as the RB25 in fantasy. Last season, he averaged just 3.7 yards per carry. That resulted in 889 rushing yards. Take those same carries with an average of 4.2 yards per carry, and he's a 1,000-yard rusher. As for the receiving game, you still will see a bunch of Tarik Cohen. We're not going to be getting rid of him, barring an injury, but Tarik Cohen had 9 drops on just 104 targets for one of the highest drop rates in the entire league. Without Cohen improving massively in this area, it's very likely David Montgomery could soak up more work in that area, and he definitely proved last season that he does have the chops to be a pass-catching running back, catching 25 of 35 total targets. Montgomery even managed to outpace Tarik Cohen in receiving efficiency, attaining 7.4 yards per reception to Cohen's 5.8. There's no guarantee either that Tarik Cohen can stay healthy. I know he has played in 16 full games for 3 consecutive seasons, but it is worth noting he is a much smaller back, which brings us to another factor which makes David Montgomery such a great value, and that is the depth chart. There is nobody behind him pushing him for total touches. Besides Tarik Cohen and David Montgomery, there is no real competition behind him. The final thing that we have to talk about is the addition of Nick Foles, of course, and for those of you that think it's a lateral move, that's fine. I do see it as a slight improvement. Nick Foles does know how to play winning football, and if they do have more red zone drives or scoring drives, that's going to directly benefit David Montgomery. Montgomery handled 87.5% of all touches inside the 5-yard line, an area we know Tarik Cohen has zero chance of taking away from him. But even with that benefit going to the wayside, just the fact that Nick Foles is a pure pocket passer, we aren't expecting to see a high amount of rushing touchdowns being vultured away from him in the red zone, and Mitchell Trubisky has been averaging 40 to 60 rushing attempts per season. We'd like to see some of those those scrambles transition into some dump off passes to the running back position. So overall, to summarize, David Montgomery is coming in at a great value because he's essentially being drafted at his floor. He's RB25 at current ADP. There's a strong likelihood of increased involvement in the offense in 2020. The only capable backup behind him is an undersized running back who dropped 9 passes last season. He has a stranglehold over the goal line rush attempts with a head coach who is nearing the hot seat for his job, and the people have spoken. They want more David Montgomery. So for those reasons, he's going to be a value this year. We're going to move over to the next player, which is a wide receiver, and that's AJ Brown out of Tennessee. Not as much analysis needs to go into this pick because the situation's simple. There's less moving parts. The pieces are coming back. We have Ryan Tannehill returning, Derrick Henry still running the show out of the backfield, and Mike Vrabel being very vocal about getting AJ Brown more involved, whether that be through the receiving game, the run game, or even potentially as a returner. So we have to ask ourselves, why is AJ Brown being drafted as the wide receiver 16 in fantasy after finishing as a rookie as the wide receiver 15. In that rookie season, on a mere 84 targets, he still was able to eclipse 1,000 receiving yards as a rookie. That is a massive milestone. Very few are able to do that. And at his age, just 22, he is in elite company. He also is able to score 8 touchdowns and also get another score as a rusher. And like I said, Mike Vrabel wants to get him more involved. 84 targets is going to come up. He is already one of the more talented receivers in the entire league, but yet people are expecting regression. So you have to ask yourself why. And it all comes down to Ryan Tannehill. The general consensus does not have faith in Ryan Tannehill, and while I will say his efficiency numbers from yards per attempt and the rate at which he threw touchdowns last season was extremely fluky. But again, this was year one. What we will see drop down from an efficiency standpoint, we're going to see them increase it from A, the chemistry gained from a full season playing together, that being AJ Brown and Ryan Tannehill, and B, the coaching staff saw what worked last season, and what worked was Ryan Tannehill to AJ Brown. They did the groundwork, they built that connection. Now it's up to Vrabel to put together the plays to get him more involved, and he's been vocal about wanting to do that. This is still Derrick Henry's team. It's a run first team, but if you expect Derrick Henry to be successful in the 2020 season, that is not going to come without success from AJ Brown. The only reasonable take I could understand against AJ Brown is if somebody would not opt to drafting Derrick Henry nor AJ Brown, with the take that potentially the Titans were a one-year wonder and what they were able to produce offensively a season ago is not going to translate for the 2020 season. The reason I say that is because the passing game and run game are going to rely on each other. You're not going to have success and open up those big plays and opportunities for AJ Brown without the success in the setup in the run game. And Derrick Henry also isn't going to have those big burst plays without those defenses being honest by having such a talented receiver, which is exactly what AJ Brown is. I had the pleasure throughout this offseason of making 2 videos, one on the Titans and another compiling the best plays made by rookies in the 2019 season. So I saw a ton of AJ Brown, and this is a special type of player. Believe it or not, there are a lot of people that believe AJ Brown's success was large in part due to variance, but I'll tell you from watching all of that film, they left a lot of yards on the field. A lot of scoring opportunities were missed, and if you could translate those misconnections by Ryan Tannehill to AJ Brown, the potential for his fantasy finish in 2019 could have even been that much higher. A lot of people are quick to say that if the quarterback play does drop off a bit, his production will completely fall off the rails. I disagree. Marcus Mariota actually threw a 55-yard touchdown to AJ Brown against Atlanta in week 4. Marcus Mariota is a backup at this point, and the level of production between Ryan Tannehill and Marcus Mariota was night and day different. I'd be willing to bet that even if something were to happen with Ryan Tannehill and they were to go to the backup quarterback, AJ Brown would more than likely still be able to put together a string of solid fantasy performances just based on his individual talent alone. And like I said, Mike Vrabel, he has been vocal. He wants to get the ball in the hands of AJ Brown more, even possibly as a returner. We saw that with Tyreek Hill a few years back as a returner. He notched on a couple of extra touchdowns throughout the season, which helped boost his per game averages as a fantasy wide receiver. This is definitely an area of the game we could see AJ Brown tack up on, which could increase his opportunity and overall touches. If they're willing to give him the ball as a returner on special teams, they're more than likely more willing to give him the ball on end arounds and also rushes out of the backfield, an area where he did also score a 40-yard touchdown just last season as well. So it's pretty simple, guys. AJ Brown, there aren't many moving parts. You have a talented receiver bringing back the same pieces that are very vocal about getting him more involved, much more so than they did last season, who on a mere 84 targets produced wide receiver 15 numbers and is currently being drafted as the wide receiver 16. If that doesn't scream value, I don't know what does. But let's move over to the next player. And the next player on this list is Kenyan Drake of the Arizona Cardinals. Kenyan Drake is a very talented player, somebody who we've all been vocal about wanting to get more touches in the offenses that he's been in. And that's exactly what Arizona was able to give to him last season. They finally unleashed a full workload onto a talented running back, and it paid off dividends in success from the backfield and also for fantasy. Through 8 games as a Cardinal, he ran the ball for 123 times, which resulted in 643 rushing yards at 5.2 yards per attempt with 8 rushing touchdowns. That's a touchdown per game on the ground. But not only that, he was averaging nearly 4 receptions per game. He notched an additional 171 receiving yards onto that total, which brought his total yards up to 814 yards in just 8 games. Break that out to a full 16 game pace, that's 1,628 yards, 16 touchdowns, and another 50 plus receptions. That is massive for fantasy. And guys, the success that he had last season was despite transitioning teams halfway through the season, basically being plug and play, not knowing the offense very well, but just being good at his job. This season, he's going to have a full offseason of work. The team fully trusts him. They felt comfortable enough to trade away David Johnson, which is the biggest vote of confidence you could possibly give to him, especially after a rusher who gave you 20 touchdowns in a single season. So guys, they love Kenyan Drake. Drake has been healthy throughout his entire career. He's in line for a massive workload on an ascending offense that has an improved passing game from a season before after the addition of DeAndre Hopkins. Having DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, and Larry Fitzgerald in the passing game is going to guarantee that defenses have no ability to stack the box. That 5.2 yards per attempt, believe it or not, is repeatable for the 2020 season. His usage in the passing game, that could also increase as well. And the best part about it, similarly to David Montgomery, there is nobody of significance or at least a guaranteed risk to take his touches away. As it stands, they have Kenyan Drake, Chase Edmonds, and DJ Foster. They're paying Kenyan Drake on a 1-year deal $8.4 million. Follow the money, guys. Drake's going to get the ball. He's going to have every opportunity to succeed, and anytime we've seen him given the ball, he's looked good. The team does have the ability to get rid of him after this year, and it is a common practice in the league to load up the touches on running backs prior to letting them exit in free agency. That is a possibility of their game plan for the upcoming season. And if that does happen and they give him a ton of touches, that's only going to produce more points for your fantasy team. And right now, Kenyan Drake is going as the RB10. Numbers that you can guarantee that he meets or exceeds so long as he doesn't get injured. So for us guys, Kenyan Drake is one of the best values in the draft. He still does cost a pretty penny to attain, but he's going to be worth it, and he's one of the safer picks that we have on this list. Moving over to a more risky pick and a rookie pick, one that I probably should have added to the top rookies to target video, and that's CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, this pick has a ton to do with talent, and also a bit to do with the offense. There is nearly 200 targets that have left this team, and in comes CeeDee Lamb to start to soak those up. As a player, he's 6'2", 198 pounds, an above average athlete, averaged 21.4 yards per reception in college, with an 81st percentile breakout age, which is a heavy indicator on success as a wide receiver. His most comparable player on playerprofiler.com is Jerry Rice. As an Eagles fan, I was very disappointed that we did not get CeeDee Lamb. I really wish we would have been able to have an opportunity to have him on the field this season, but unfortunately, it's going to the Cowboys, and the Cowboys are lucky to have him. A lot of people aren't interested in CeeDee Lamb at all because yes, he's a good prospect for dynasty or potentially the future, but a lot of people are misinterpreting his potential value for the upcoming season. CeeDee Lamb does have the possibility of being second on this team in targets. Like I said, nearly 200 targets left this team a season ago. Dak Prescott is a top 5 quarterback on everybody's board, so they are expecting good things from him. Dak Prescott usually does play to the pieces around him, so if the parts around him are good, he normally plays up to that level. If the pieces around him are bad, he usually plays worse. So a Dak Prescott with an Amari Cooper, with an Ezekiel Elliott is going to make a better CeeDee Lamb. Now his number one competition for targets and touches is going to be Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup though is being drafted in the middle rounds. CeeDee Lamb is virtually free. Now I know Michael Gallup is somewhat proven. He did have 66 receptions for over 1,100 yards, and he's a good receiver, don't get me wrong. But CeeDee CeeDee Lamb, he has the ability to be even better. Obviously, there's no chance while Amari Cooper's healthy that CeeDee Lamb has any sort of wide receiver one upside or anything, but we've seen plenty of stretches in Amari Cooper's career where he goes hot and cold. 7 of his 16 games last season, he was held to under 50 yards. When Amari Cooper goes cold, and remember he's getting that top coverage, somebody else is going to be getting those targets. Last season it was Michael Gallup. I definitely see CeeDee Lamb getting a target market share this year, and there were points last season where Michael Gallup was also banged up. You insert CeeDee Lamb into the wide receiver 2 slot if anything were to happen with Michael Gallup, and you instantly have a guy you can plug and play every week. You can't find that in the late rounds for virtually free. Nobody's targeting CeeDee Lamb right now because Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper are both ahead of him, yet there is a realistic path for him to get targets without the wheels having to fall off on Amari Cooper and Gallup. But if those negative things do start to hit those receivers, CeeDee Lamb will be in a prime position to succeed. So for those reasons, coupled in with CeeDee Lamb being drafted at about wide receiver 50, which is virtually free, he comes in at an immense value for the 2020 season, and that's why he makes this list. But we still have one final player. The final player is Kareem Hunt of the Cleveland Browns, and I know a few of you have been vocal about not being super interested in taking Kareem Hunt this year, and understandably so because Nick Chubb did have an incredible year. He finished as the running back 7, ran for nearly 1,500 yards, averaged 5 yards per attempt, and was no slouch in the receiving game either, notching on an additional 36 receptions for 278 yards. So in total, he produced over 1,700 yards of offense and 8 touchdowns. While that's not dramatically high, Cleveland struggled heavily. If the offense were to fire on all cylinders, especially with the level of talent that they have, the expectancy for touchdowns for the rusher out of this backfield would be much higher than 8 touchdowns and would likely come up. Now, I know I'm talking a lot about Nick Chubb, and we will bring this back to Kareem Hunt. Part of the reason Nick Chubb had such a fantastic fantasy football season was because he was the only guy in town. Unfortunately for Chubb, as soon as Kareem Hunt came in, we saw his work in the receiving game take a significant dip. Kareem Hunt came back in week 10. Prior to week 10, Nick Chubb had 4 or more targets in 7 of 10 games. After the return of Kareem Hunt after week 10, he did not have a single game with 4 or more targets. On the flip side, Kareem Hunt, as soon as he stepped on the field, was averaging 5.5 targets per game, which is what makes his floor as desirable as it is for fantasy. You're talking about a player in his first 6 games had no fewer than 11.6 points in half-point PPR. Now, if you're in standard, this pick is not going to have the same amount of value. This is definitely a half PPR or PPR type of value pick. But if you have a guy who can guarantee you in the flex spot 11 plus fantasy points every week, that's the type of safety that you're going to want on your roster. On top of that, he has top 5 upside if anything were to happen to Nick Chubb. So even though he's not the starter, it does not mean that he is completely unusable for fantasy. Take advantage of that. He's like a handcuff on steroids, not literally on steroids, but he provides you 2 benefits: the handcuff that you stash on the bench, but also a guy who, almost regardless of matchup, you can plug and play in your flex spot that you know won't disappoint because he has that high PPR floor. Now, I don't want to blow this out of proportion, but there are rumors that he could see snaps from the slot, in which case this pick has even more upside than a flex starter. You're talking about a borderline RB2 right from the get-go just due to the receiving floor. Head coach Kevin Stefanski does prefer to run more 2 tight end sets over 4 wideout formations, which will benefit players like David Njoku, but also Kareem Hunt. So guys, think about it. You have a flex level player with potential RB2 upside being drafted as the running back 30, who is also the ultimate handcuff because he becomes a borderline top 5 running back if anything were to happen to Nick Chubb. So for us, it's simple. Kareem Hunt is one of the most spectacular values in the upcoming fantasy draft. Let us know who your best value picks are for the upcoming season. But that's it for this video, guys. If you did enjoy it, please hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.